rain to parts of East Anglia. But elsewhere, it is looking a little drier. The winds, though, coming in from the northwest, and that's where we're feeding the showers in. So western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales, seeing heavy showers this morning, hail and thunder possible too. That rain finally ebbing away from Norfolk, which means most of eastern and southern England dry and bright with sunny spells. Only the small chance for shower here and there. Across the Midlands, we may see one or two, and possibly in the southwest also. Even where we've got the showers, they'll tend to zip through on the breeze, but it will feel pretty chilly out there. Temperatures 5 to 7, maybe 8 Celsius, but add on that wind and it feels colder. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow over the Scottish hills, and we'll keep some showers feeding in this evening into northwest England and North Wales, so staying pretty wet here. But elsewhere, largely dry, clearer skies and lighter winds will allow a frost. You can see the blue hue on the map there for eastern Scotland, northeast England as we head into the weekend. So a cold and frosty start here, certainly in rural areas. Further west, more cloud and rain starting to spill in, so turning damp pretty quickly on Saturday morning across Northern Ireland and western Scotland. This area of rain then works in across the rest of the UK, not reaching eastern parts of England till pretty late in the day, so most of Saturday dry here, but it will, I suspect, feel pretty cold in the east, where we're going to start with some pockets of frost clouding over and temperatures only 5 or 6 at best. Further west it will be turning milder, but as you can see also wetter and windier. Plenty going on then this weekend. This set of weather fronts moving in for Saturday, and it links back to another area of low pressure that could bring some wet and windy weather in the northwest on Sunday, but will also turn things milder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome to the briefing with me, Isabel Oakeshott. Lots coming up today. With Russian forces massing on the border with Ukraine and warnings of an imminent invasion, I'll speak exclusively to Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Also a disastrous week for Boris Johnson as new COVID restrictions are brought in, fallouts over multiple alleged parties and mutiny on his backbenches. We'll speak to 2 Tory MPs. And what is buried in Lord Mountbatten's diaries? Could it embarrass the Queen? Well, we'll be speaking to a royal biographer. But first, it's the news.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. This is your news at midday.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited following a win by the US government in London's High Court. Judges overturned a previous ruling that he shouldn't be sent to the US because of the risk of suicide. He's wanted on allegations of a conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information after hundreds of thousands of leaked documents on the Afghan and Iraq wars were published. His fiancée, Stella Morris, says they'll appeal the decision.
Every generation has an epic fight to fight, and this is ours because Julian represents the fundamentals of what it means to live in a free society, of what it means to have press freedom, of what it means for journalists to do their jobs without being afraid of spending the rest of their lives in prison. I urge everyone to come together and fight for Julian. Julian represents all our liberties and all our rights.
The Prime Minister's under growing pressure as claims about number 10 Christmas parties continue to emerge. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he's unfit to lead the country, with 3 gatherings allegedly held during lockdown last December now being investigated by the Cabinet Secretary. Boris Johnson's also facing questions over whether he misled an investigation into donations to refurbish his flat after he was fined by the Electoral Commission.
Credibility is gone. I mean, there's been a succession of crises, and the latest debacle is probably the final straw. So I don't think he has a future. He could even be gone, sooner rather than later. I think it's over, and I think most people recognise that.
Well, an increasing number of MPs say they'll vote against the new COVID rules next week. That's as Plan B is enforced across England in a bid to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. Masks should now be worn in most indoor settings, including cinemas and theatres, but they're not required in hospitality settings like pubs. The measures come ahead of a return to working from home on Monday and mandatory COVID passports for large venues from Wednesday. Conservative MP Craig McKinley told GB News he can't support the government.
It's rather bizarre that the government's saying, well, we want to take some liberties away, but it's for your own liberty in the future. I don't like the sound of that. I'm not yet convinced. I don't want to go down the path of vaccine passports and mandation. I want a bit more data so that we can make the proper decisions at the right time, because this is going to cost jobs, lives, and mental health and livelihoods.
Well, meanwhile, the UK is dealing with its largest ever outbreak of avian flu, with cases now identified across 40 properties. More than 20,000 birds have been culled in Northern Ireland, and the highly pathogenic H5N1 has also been discovered at a third property in Scotland. Exclusion zones are being set up around the affected properties. And a spectacular natural phenomenon's been caught on camera in Italy. A huge waterspout formed off the coast of Ostia near Rome. Natural water columns like this happen when winds blowing in different directions run into each other. Local media reported the whirlwind lasted for about 15 minutes. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to the briefing with Isabel.
Welcome to the briefing. Now, the big story of the week is what's been going on in Downing Street and the steady stream of half-truths, untruths, and let's be straight about it, lies that have been coming out of Number 10 about the parties Boris Johnson staffed through this time last year during lockdown. And later in the programme, we are absolutely going to be turning to this because I'm hopping mad about it, and I know many of you are too. But for now, I want to look at something a bit different and arguably a lot more serious than who had cheese and wine or played Secret Santa in Number 10 when the rest of us were having precisely no fun on our own this time last year. Because as we speak, there is a very real prospect of war breaking out between Russia and Ukraine. And this is a war in which the UK would be involved. Right now, around 100,000 Russian troops are gathering on the Russian border with Ukraine. Now, to put that in context, that is more than the entire British Army. And American satellite images, which I'm hoping we are able to show you here, show a huge build-up of Russian tanks, personnel carriers, artillery, and ammunition. And we'll come to those images in a minute. Now, if this continues, by the new year, the US estimates that there could be almost double that number of Russian troops on those borders. It looks very much like they are preparing to invade, and that is what our top military people fear. Now, this may all feel very, very far away to you at home, but it's not actually that far off our doorstep. All of this is happening on the borders of the EU, and President Putin is no friend of ours. This is about how much power he has and how much closer he creeps towards us. As a mark of just how seriously the UK is taking this situation, earlier this week, our own Defence Secretary Ben Wallace visited Kiev, where he had a meeting with the Ukrainian president. And during that meeting, he voiced the UK's unwavering support for Ukraine should Russian invasion take place. And meanwhile, President Biden has held talks with President Putin about the military build-up, and he's warned of dire consequences for the Kremlin if this goes any further. The problem is that Putin believes that Ukraine really belongs to Russia and he wants it back. And back in 2014, he showed just how serious he is about this by illegally annexing part of the country, the Crimea. And he's been trying to take more of it in the Donbass region ever since. So with me to discuss this very worrying situation is the Ukrainian ambassador, Vadim Prystaiko. Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time to come into GB News at what is a very serious time for your country. Could you tell us, first of all, how serious and significant the military build-up is on your borders?
Thank you. This is serious, 100, and it's been growing and it will grow. We believe that by the January will be 170,000 of them. It is not enough yet to topple down our army, which is almost 250,000 now, and it's strong because we've been fighting for 7 years. But that if anything happened, there will be major catastrophe for both nations and probably for Europe as well.
So just to be clear for our viewers, we're talking here about an escalation, really, of a war that has actually been going on since 2014. It's been something of a war of attrition. People here don't hear about it very much, but that has very much been an ongoing conflict, despite a ceasefire having been signed in 2014?
Many times have been signed and then broke down. Now, why we are sometimes restrained, people don't understand what's wrong with Ukrainians. We've been fighting and dying over these 7 years. 13,000 lives were already lost.
How many?
13,000 plus.
30.
13, 1-3.
13.
And most of them are civilians, unfortunately, some military personnel, and these people are dying each and every day. We've been shelled each and every day. 7% of the territory is already lost to Russians, and that we are trying all these years to get out of this in peaceful manner as well. You know, on top of this military campaign, slow simmering, we've been trying peacefully to resolve it with them, with the help of Germans, France. Now, finally, United States is getting into the picture more and more, and the UK, and some others.
So what happens if we all just shut our eyes here in the West and say, look, we've got plenty of problems of our own, and President Putin is allowed to continue his activities unchecked? How do you see that playing out if we don't get involved?
People argue that he is not very strategically minded person himself, but will snatch an opportunity if it is here. And what he was creating all these last months, that's just create to, to threaten everybody, us in the first place, but then West, that I am in control, I am a guy here. So if you stay away, I will resolve it this way or another. In other conversations, he will say, guys, you don't even have to fight with me. We can still trade gas or fur coats, I don't know what else. We will take care of Ukrainians. We know how to do it, and so on and so forth. But the problem is that we've been going the West, and this 7 years was not changing our mood. I mean, Ukrainians, not just government, but people as well. We wanted to become in the West with a big W, and so everything comes with the package. What Putin is offering is not attractive anymore to our people.
So some will say this is just Putin saber rattling, and he will say it is a defensive operation. Do you find that credible? Are these operations on the borders purely defensive?
This is still 200 kilometers from us. It will take a march for the tanks to get in our territory. But the problem is that they already have people in our place. It's not just Crimea with 35,000 of them. It's not that Transnistria on another side of Ukraine, in the Republic of Moldova. It's the people on the western border of ours, so-called supported, the separatists supported. But then we have another front in Belarus, which has been digested by Russians right now as we speak. So now we're totally surrounded by forces friendly to him like Belarusians or his own people like everywhere around Ukraine.
And some of his activities don't look very defensive, do they? I understand he has special forces. He has also been the military have been conducting exercises that involve simulating taking over an airport. Is that correct?
Especially paratroopers, which were taking over the airport. It's not very much you can see it as the defensive move. The problem also is that we have undefended borders in the Black Sea, which we can expect the assault. That's why we are cooperating, and by the way, with the UK as well, to rebuild our navy, which has been completely destroyed, and even naval bases were taken by Russians in Crimea. So we do not have any means to protect ourselves. We have to work fast to regain some of these capabilities.
And as a mark of how involved the UK already is, we have been helping with some training in Ukraine for a number of years. Your allies have historically been pretty nervous about providing any ammunition, but that is beginning to change. And just this week, I think a deal was signed or concluded recently in terms of some naval support. Can you tell us what that was from the UK?
I was privileged myself to sign a £1.7 billion contract. This is credit. This is not a gift to us. It will create how strange it sounds, but it also creates jobs on both sides, here and in Ukraine, because these ships will be built here in Ukraine. The ports will be built with the assistance of the Great Britain's companies. But that's actually not about jobs. Mostly it's about us to be able to defend ourselves. On top of what the United States is doing, you're probably just the second or third nations which is openly staying with us.
And in terms of your own armed forces, I know you, because I myself have actually been out to the front line in eastern Ukraine. It was a fascinating experience to see how that long war has been playing out. And I've been in the trenches there very briefly, I'm fortunate to say.
Very brave.
But I have seen that you are building up your own armed forces. You've put a lot of resources into that. But the reality is they are no match, really, for the full might of the Russian armed forces.
Some people say that small red army can't win the big red army. Our idea is to become not the red army, but become something better than that. Maybe we're not that big in numbers.
You could be smart.
Smarter. When Soviet Union collapsed, we had 1 million people under the rifles. Now we're quarter of this number. And the nuclear capabilities which we had and we gave over in return of the guarantees to defend us, by the way, signed by UK as well. So this time is over. We have to rebuild our army on something better, like NATO standard. That's why we're going to NATO.
And what more can Britain do to help? We've been involved for some years. Would you now like to see us doing even more?
What you're doing already is very important to allow us to reform ourselves, to bring the experience and expertise here. The only problem with that we're running out of time.
Yeah.
We have to be better society, better economy, better army, but we have to do something right now, right away to deter the immediate threat of attack.
And how much confidence do you have in President Biden to intervene and come good on his threats to Vladimir Putin if indeed Russia did do the unthinkable and invaded?
I hope that the message which President Biden gave to President Putin was quite clear, that the consequences will be catastrophic for Russia as well. But we also wanted everybody knows that Ukraine still have their own right to see their own future. If this comes to the price very high for Ukrainians, the compromise between big twos, we will have our word to say. We don't want our fate to be decided behind our backs, even between our friends of the United States and our enemies of Russia.
But are you confident that President Biden is as good as his word? We know that he is more exercised probably by the threat posed by China. Do you really have faith that if Russia does the worst, America will come to your rescue?
I believe that when the United States and you are watching what is going on in Northern Korea or in Iran, these nations which are trying to become nuclear nations, and you're trying to persuade them that you have to exchange the nuclear weapons for the piece of paper, which we signed some 30 years ago, they are very mindful with whether Ukraine will get out of this conflict. If Ukraine will be victorious, then they will understand that there is some law, there is some international obligations which can be supported, they can be respected later on.
Now, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and that's the alliance under which an attack on one member state is viewed as an attack on all. Obviously, if you were members of NATO, you would have incredible protection. That's something that the Russian president is extremely nervous about. Tell me where you are at in terms of perhaps progress towards joining NATO.
Let's be frank, out of 30 members of NATO, there are just a couple of them which will openly support our even approach in the NATO, a so-called membership action plan, which was promised to us in 2008, but now in 2021 is not given. What we wanted to become, we don't want to get behind the bars of NATO and try to poke bear in eye. No, we want the same level of protection that you enjoy. That's all we need.
And what do you say to President Putin when he says, look, you lot have escalated this. You know, you're provoking an escalation in activities. It's all your fault and your responsibility. And, you know, I'm just protecting my interests here.
I see the only way we can provoke him or escalate is just being existing here in this part of the globe. We exist, and that's what bothering him, because that's probably the danger for his own way of ruling his own people, which are very close to us. And he believes that by being able to reform ourselves, being able to become democratic and liberal society, which we still have to way to go. But that's a threat, not our forces. We are not nuclear nation. How can we threat him with this huge territory and resources and even people resources?
Now, talking to the experts about this and defence analysts, they really fear that if President Putin is ever going to invade, the time will be just after Christmas, when he sees weakness in the West, you know, a President Biden distracted by other things. How important is timing here? How much longer have we got to prevent anything happening?
Very important. I agree with the experts. There is another thing, Ukrainian black soil, famously for the fertility, also famous for not allowing anything to move when it is, you know, wet and it's not solid after all this possible winter months. So if he has to do something, there is very narrow window of opportunity. That's why everybody is so nervous right now.
And just to remind our viewers why this matters to the West.
Because it's not far, as you mentioned, it's not that far from you. This is just on another side of the same continent we're all collectively living. And I believe that this international, you know, the effect which can resonate around the globe. I don't want to talk about something like use the big words like World War III. But if anything happens in this part, we will be fighting to the death. We are 40 million nation. The catastrophe will be enormous. We have already 1.5 million people been displaced, but we can absorb them, and we're absorbing them in our own society. Imagine if any major military conflict happens. We will contain it as much as we can, but different. Refugees is just something to scare people here, but the losses, the enormous losses, and God forbid, the nuclear weapon, or nuclear stations in Ukraine. We're second by number of nuclear stations after France. So anything happens, we remember Chernobyl, and that's again in our lands.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for making time to come in today. So, we are now going to catch up on what's going on with the weather. We'll keep...
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A cold wind blowing out there this Friday. Most places seeing some winter sunshine, but there are also quite a few showers, mostly across the west. Now, we've seen some wet weather across the east from this chain of low-pressure systems, an old weather front that's slowly moving out into the North Sea, taking the rain finally away from Norfolk. But we do have the breeze coming in from the northwest, and that is bringing the showers into North Wales, northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy ones, hail, thunder is possible. A few showers too for Cornwall, but much of central and eastern England, much of eastern Scotland staying dry and fine with sunny spells. Just a few showers creeping down towards Birmingham at times during the afternoon. Temperatures around about on Saturday looking fairly wet across western Scotland, a bit of snow on the hills, and then we'll see patchy rain trickling into Wales, southwest England too, and eventually most places turning damp by the end of the day, but East Anglia and the southeast probably not seeing much rain until fairly late on. It will feel pretty cold in these eastern areas, 5 or 6 degrees of that cloud spills in, but turning milder in the southwest, double digits likely here. The rain becoming more extensive across the southeast during Saturday evening, so a fairly wet end to Saturday here, but easing off across Scotland and Northern Ireland, at least a few blustery showers in the northwest. Sunday, a bit of a mixed picture. Grey in the south, brighter in the north, but the potential for some very windy weather in the northwest on Sunday night. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now let's return to the crisis in Ukraine. It's a foreign policy story that really matters in this country. We've heard from their ambassador about the perilous situation with Russian forces building up on the border. And in a moment, I'm going to be speaking to Conservative MP Daniel Kaczynski. But for the meantime, I'm joined by the amazing Professor Mark Galetti, who is author of a book called We Need to Talk About Putin. And he's an expert in all things Russia. Hello, Mark. Do we have you? Yeah, we do. Hello, Professor Mark Galetti. Hello there. I hope you heard that interview with the ambassador there. I thought it was extremely interesting, particularly towards the end, when he talked about the possibility of an escalation to war, which could involve Russian forces targeting Ukrainian nuclear power stations. What did you make of that?
Yes, I mean, look, we're talking nightmare scenarios now. And in fairness, it's highly unlikely that the Russians would actively target these power stations, not least because if anything happened, they're in the neighborhood as well. And just as Chernobyl, the Chernobyl disaster also affected Russia. But on the other hand, the point is, once this kind of a war starts, it's very hard to control it. There is a natural escalation mistakes happen, people take stupid decisions. So I think that's one of the many reasons why, ideally,
So, Professor Galetti, unfortunately, we've had some issues there with the audio. We will try to return to Mark Galetti. But in the meantime, we will talk to Tory MP Daniel Kaczynski, who has a special interest in the Russian regime. Daniel, before we get on to this really serious matter, I have to ask you, since you are here with us today, about the state of the Conservative Party and this week's shocking series of revelations about shenanigans in Downing Street. What do you sense of the mood of the party on all of that?
Well, I think that having been in office for 11 years and now mid-term, it's not unusual for any political party to come into mid-term turbulence, which clearly we have done at the moment. And we're taking a bit of a kicking, bruising from the electorate. But I have every confidence. You and I have discussed this in the past, but I personally have every confidence in the Prime Minister. I don't think there is anybody else in the Conservative Parliamentary Party who at this juncture would do a better job than Boris Johnson. Have mistakes been made? Of course they have. But does he continue to have my confidence? Yes, he does. And I very much hope that we can start to move on to some of the issues which are relevant and important for our constituents, such as how do we stay on top of this pandemic and how do we get the economy going again as quickly as possible.
I promise we'll come on to Russia in a minute because that is why you're here. But the truth of the matter is, isn't it, Daniel Kaczynski, that your colleagues are having conversations about replacing Boris Johnson?
Well, when you've got 365 Conservative members of Parliament, is there going to be complete unanimity amongst all 365 at all times in the electoral cycle? No, that's somewhat unrealistic. Will there be people who are upset at the revelations of what happened in number 10 Downing Street and some of the things that have happened? Yes, there will be. These people are entitled to have their views, just like I am entitled to have mine. The local associations will also be writing to the party chairman with their own views. All I can say to you is that personally, I think the Prime Minister has done a good job under very difficult circumstances, quite extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And I very much hope that my colleagues will give him the support that is needed at this very difficult juncture in order for us to start to reconnect with the electorate, because it's going to be extraordinarily important to ensure that Sir Keir and his shadow cabinet do not take office at the next general election.
Well, you're obviously a loyalist. I can certainly tell you from my conversations this morning that not everybody is feeling quite so forgiving. Now, turning to Russia, all this may feel very far away to our viewers. I think that's sometimes a problem with foreign policy stories. We tend to switch off a bit. Can you explain why the build-up of Russian military on the Ukrainian borders really matters to people in this country?
Well, I'm the only Conservative member of Parliament who was born in a communist country, in Poland. So I saw as a child at first hand what the Russians are capable of in terms of imposing their will and controlling the country of my birth, Poland. And many of these countries in Central and Eastern Europe were trapped for 50 years behind an iron curtain, which descended from Szczecin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic. And the Soviet Union, the Russians, in a post-World War scenario, tried to literally control the economy and the politics of half of Europe. We celebrated when that politically Orwellian and economically illiterate system was defeated by the courage, the courageous actions of young people demonstrating against communist regimes. And there was no greater significant, poignant moment when the Berlin Wall itself was dismantled in 1989. Unfortunately now, having had a relative period of stability, President Putin is now trying to create a new Iron Curtain. But just that this Iron Curtain is going to be a little bit further east. And so he wants to trap Ukraine, Belarus, and ultimately the Baltic states within his sphere of influence. And I think that what he wants to do is he wants to replicate the scenario of Belarus in Ukraine and in the Baltic states, so that ostensibly they have a veneer of independence and sovereignty, but in reality they are controlled by puppets whose strings are pulled from Moscow. That is extremely dangerous, because who is it who is always dragged into a European conflagration? History has taught us that whether it's the First World War or the Second World War, Britain is always getting involved in wars. And so we must stand firm now against these attempts by Russia to destabilize our partners in Central and Eastern Europe.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Tory MP Daniel Kaczynski. Now, I'm glad to say that I think we've got Professor Mark Galetti back again. I'm sorry about those audio problems that we had there. Mark, I was just asking you, in a nutshell, what is President Putin playing at here? Is this all saber-rattling, or is it something more serious this time?
Well, I mean, the honest answer is we don't know for sure. But what we do know is that the way Putin tends to operate is he is a judo fighter, not a chess player. He doesn't have a single grand plan that he thinks is going to lead to checkmate in 7 moves or whatever. He looks for opportunities. He's building up this very serious force, which means he's got the option of invading. But that's probably not his plan A or his plan B. He's probably looking for concessions from Kyiv and concessions from the West. The question is whether or not he's going to feel he can take the political hit and back down if he doesn't get those concessions.
And there could be a face-saving issue, as always, with that. Now, what leverage do we have? Perhaps you could explain to our viewers about the issue of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which is quite a kind of, sounds a bit James Bond, but is actually quite a serious sort of factor in the geopolitics here.
Yes, I mean, this is a new gas pipeline that stretches to Germany and taps into Russia's newer and rather more productive gas fields. And for the Russians, this is a very, very serious economic advantage that they're hoping to open up. It's fully built. It just needs to be certified by the German government. And this gives us some leverage. I mean, again, unfortunately, we don't have that many. There are other gas pipelines, particularly through Ukraine, that the Russians would rather not use because they have to pay the Ukrainians for their use. So we do have that as one of our political instruments. And it seems almost certain that if the Russians do invade, then the German government would absolutely sort of not use the pipeline. But the trouble is, I mean, at the moment, that's one of the relatively few ones we have. There's a talk of all kinds of other economic sanctions, taking Russia out of the SWIFT interbank system and so forth. And would these hurt Russia? They would. But the point is, this is an authoritarian regime. Putin is willing to put up with a lot of pain because he's not having to take that pain. It's going to be inflicted on ordinary Russians. So that's really the political calculation. Is Putin willing to create harder life for ordinary Russians in the name of building his grand geopolitical status as Russia as a great power?
Thank you for explaining that. It's a very complex picture there, Professor Mark Galetti, and I really hope that we can have you on again. After the break, we'll be speaking to another Conservative MP to hear more on the mood in the party after the PM's disastrous week. But here, first, it's your news update.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. Here are the latest headlines. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited following a win by the US government in High Court. Judges overturned a previous ruling that he shouldn't be sent to the US, where he's wanted on allegations of conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information. He plans to appeal. The Prime Minister's under growing pressure as claims about number 10 Christmas parties continue to emerge. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says Boris Johnson's unfit to lead the country after 3 gatherings were allegedly held during lockdown last December. An increasing number of MPs say they'll vote against the new COVID rules next week. That's as Plan B is enforced across England in a bid to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. Masks should now be worn in most indoor settings. Working from home will be reintroduced from Monday. The UK is dealing with its largest ever outbreak of avian flu, with cases now identified across 40 properties. More than 20,000 birds have been culled in Northern Ireland, and the virus has been discovered at a 3rd property in Scotland. Exclusion zones are being set up around the affected properties. I'll be back with a full update at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, the big running story this week is what's been going on in Downing Street. And the question everyone's now asking is whether Boris Johnson will survive. Because make no mistake, voters are incredibly angry that the very people who imposed horrendous coronavirus restrictions on the rest of us did not follow their own rules. The scale of suffering caused by the draconian lockdown is unimaginable. Hundreds of thousands of missed cancers, people in crippling pain, unable to see doctors or get treatment, kids imprisoned in hellhole high rises, the elderly cut off from all that mattered to them in care homes, and then dying alone in their final hours. And who can forget the Queen in black in her lonely church pew, or indeed little Arthur Lavinia Hughes with a bruise for every day of lockdown. And now it turns out that Downing Street staffers just laughed and partied on. Well, with me to discuss the events of this week is Ben Bradley, Tory MP for Mansfield. Ben, thank you for joining us. What do you think the mood is in the Conservative Parliamentary Party at the moment?
Well, it's certainly been a pretty terrible few weeks. I think, I've had constituents in my surgery this morning expressing exactly the view that you've just put across. As a member of Parliament, it is perhaps doubly frustrating because we see both the unfairness of that, but also then get the 1,000 emails in the inbox where we are guilty by association. And that is incredibly frustrating as an MP. You want to be able to support the government and the PM. It's not been easy to do that over the last few weeks. I think the key thing going forward, can't fix the past, is that the PM now gets a grip of this. There needs to be that investigation. There needs to be outcomes. There needs to be punishment for those who have broken rules, and we need to get a grip of it.
I mean, the difficulty here is, isn't it, that there's going to carry on being a drip, drip, drip of revelations. We saw last night it emerged that the Prime Minister's press secretary, Jack Doyle, was at that party and apparently read out awards. As far as I know, unless something's happened in the last hour or so, he has not yet resigned. Should all of those involved in that party, the notorious one, just quit now, or are you otherwise going to just string out the pain?
Well, everybody needs to have a good hard look at themselves. I think the idea that, you know, these things are ever secret, that things that they think are secret will remain secret, is just nonsense. We know that this stuff comes out, and if they feel they've been involved in things that were wrong, they should hold their hands up immediately. The idea, you know, that they should not take that fall if they have done wrong, and they should throw the PM under the bus instead, both politically and morally, is not the right thing to do. So I think that's a question for them. I also think that whether you know, the rules were strictly speaking broken or not, whether it was a meeting with wine or a party, all that kind of debate is kind of irrelevant, because what is clear is that what has happened, whether it was trying to push the boundaries of the rules or breaking them or whatever, is something that's not been found to be morally acceptable, and they need to, as I say, have a good hard look at themselves. And if they think that they have pushed those boundaries and they've not had the respect for the office that they hold that they should have, then they should consider that position, I think.
So just to be plain and talk in simple language here, do you think all those involved should resign?
I think if they've broken rules, or they think that they have overstepped the mark, and they might think that things are hidden away for the time being, as you said, we can't have a steady drip of things coming out over the next few days and weeks. If they think that they are hiding things currently, then they should make that plain now and go. As the PM said, you know.
Do you personally have confidence in the Prime Minister?
As I said, I think he needs to get a grip of this. I think he's been let down by a lot of people around him in the last few weeks, and that's incredibly frustrating. He's got a lot going on. We've got a global pandemic. We're still dealing with all sorts of issues around Brexit and other international challenges. And he is now having to defend or to talk about his staff having a party. That's not right, and it should be those people protecting the Prime Minister, not throwing him under the bus, so to speak. So, yeah, he needs to get a hold of it. I think that he can, and that he will, and that, you know, that investigation is the right thing. But he hasn't got, you know, he's not got forever to do that. We need to get a grip of it quickly.
And you've described yourself as the first brick in the red wall, the so-called red wall of former Labour strongholds in the Midlands and the North that are now held as Tory seats. Now, one thing I've noticed, just looking at social media, is that the scale of concern among red wall Tories about the events of the last week, they seem to be particularly vocal about it. Is that something that you've picked up, that red wall colleagues are especially worried about this? I mean, presumably they're beginning to get worried about their seats.
Well, I think one of the key things that's come across to me in a number of elections, and some of the reason that I think this shift from Labour to Conservatives in some of these seats has happened, has been about fairness. And when you look at some of the situations that are really important to some of those communities, small boats, for example, people put it down to all sorts of things. Really, it's about fairness. It's about paying into the system and getting out from the system in the right ways and the right proportions. This is a similar problem. This is about fairness. And if it's that perception of one rule for them and another one for us, is a really powerful and damaging thing. And as I say, it's something we need to get a grip of, because there have been multiple examples of that over the last few weeks.
Now, you're all going to be keen to look forward, not back. Next week, I think there's going to be a vote, isn't there, on the proposed so-called Plan B restrictions. Tell us where you stand on Plan B and whether these measures are necessary.
It makes me really uncomfortable, to be honest, Isabel. I think we are in a position where, ironically, Theresa May was pretty sound on this earlier in the week, saying, there's only so long that you can impose restrictions on a just-in-case basis or turn the taps on and off on the economy just in case. I think you have to ask the question how many times you go round that loop before you're in a position where you just got to have to live with it. And I think that the cost and the challenge of things like COVID passports for many businesses, the impact of additional restrictions causing cancellations across the board is a real and genuine one in terms of jobs and employment, but also in terms of isolation, mental health, and all the challenges that we're facing, not to mention the inherent kind of unfairness, I think, of vaccine passports and this discussion about mandatory vaccinations, which would just be abhorrent. So makes me really uncomfortable, and I think I'm going to have to vote against at least parts of it next week.
And I think quite a significant number of your colleagues will be doing that. How do you see the vote actually falling next week?
Well, Labour have made quite clear that they will back it, which I think means it's probably almost inevitable that it will pass. I think that's a shame. There really needs to be scrutiny and a proper debate about this. As I say, some of those things, particularly where the data still says that 0 people have been hospitalised because of this new strain of the virus. I really struggle to justify those restrictions on that basis. Unfortunately, as I say, it seems likely to pass anyway, and we're going to have to abide by those rules. But there's already talk of, Plan C and what comes next, and it just begs the question, how long do you go on? As I say, turning the taps on and off on the economy, because it won't last that long. We are not just an economy, an appendage to the NHS as a country. We've got to protect those other elements: lives, livelihoods, incomes, people's mental health and social lives and rights and freedoms, just as much as we need to protect lives and health.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, thank you very much, Ben Bradley. It'll be very interesting to see how the numbers stack up next week. I think at least 50 rebels so far have made their views known. So that could be quite an interesting revolt. Now, we're going to move on to The Cause. This is a bit of the programme where I interview public figures, people in positions of influence, about a charity or issue that matters to them. And today I'm going to do something a bit unusual. I'm going to be talking to a historian, Andrew Lowney, about his fight for the release of the diaries and personal papers of the late Earl Mountbatten, known as Dickie Mountbatten. Now, he was an extraordinary figure, uncle of the late Prince Philip, mentor to Prince Charles, great-grandson of Queen Victoria, former Viceroy of India and confidant in general of the royals. And he was assassinated by the IRA in 1979. Now, some years ago, his family sold his private diaries and papers and also those belonging to his wife, Edwina. And they were bought by Southampton University for an extremely big sum, £2.8 million. I think some of that money went to help the family pay for a new roof on their stately home. And they were bought with the help of public money, and that, as we're going to see, is an important fact here. And then what happened? Well, Southampton University, having pledged to make these extremely interesting papers public, tried to squirrel them away. Now, Andrew, who's with me here in the studio, has been battling to make all these documents public ever since, haven't you? Tell us about this fight and what has happened to these papers, because some of them now are out, aren't they? But not all of them.
Yes, the family bought these papers, or sold these papers very freely. They'd already been vetted by the family. In fact, stuff has been kept back by the family.
So the family took out things that they thought might be too personal? Or...
Exactly, all his girlfriends, all those things. All the material on the royal family that was sensitive was sent to the Royal Archives. So these were freely sold. They could have gone to an American archive where there would have been no censorship. But actually Southampton, who actually were storing the papers already on loan, bought them with public monies. This was also under the acceptance and lieu scheme, so that actually the sum was more like £5 million.
So was that instead of paying tax,
Exactly.
inheritance tax or one of those?
Exactly. So there's £5 million in effect of public's money. Our taxpayers' money has been spent on this. And I knew they'd been quoted in previous books that they existed. So when I started researching my book in 2015, I asked to see them.
It's a treasure trove for you.
It's fantastic. I mean, for a biographer, to see the day-to-day life of your subject, who they saw, what they said, how they felt, letters between them.
And in their own hand, it's his diaries.
Exactly. Absolutely invaluable for a biographer. Southampton claimed to know nothing about them. Anyway, eventually, after various...
Claimed to know nothing about them?
That was the line. I mean, I have to say there have been lies all the way down the line from both Southampton and the Cabinet Office who seem to have muscled in on this. And indeed, I had to go to the Information Commissioner 8 times to get the Southampton to respond. And the Information Commissioner actually had contempt of court proceedings, the first time ever, issued against Southampton for their failure to answer. Anyway, I then discovered, or succeeded in 2019, in getting the material released. The Information Commissioner ruled that Southampton must release it. They appealed that decision. It's taken 2 years for that appeal to come through. And we had the appeal a few weeks ago. It was in some ways completely superfluous because actually over the last few weeks, Southampton have been releasing the material. 99% of it has now been released.
Right.
And what I would say is, having spent £250,000 of my own money...
This man has spent £250,000 of his own money trying to get justice, in a sense, for the proper use of taxpayers' money to get these historic documents revealed. Your family must be doing their nut about this, aren't they?
They've been very good about it. But I mean, my book's long out. My book came out 2 years ago. But I felt there were... I don't think that's profitable.
No.
Both
Yeah.
I might as well continue to get this material available for other historians. It's an invaluable resource. Second, it's said in importance to the Churchill Archive in Cambridge. But also, I think they're very important issues here.
I'm just going to break in just for a minute here because we've got some audio problems there. And I think people might be wondering why this is so important. And I think the issues here go to the heart of the proper use of taxpayers' money. What has happened here is that as Andrew was explaining, some £5 million equivalent of taxpayers' money was used to acquire these documents, and then the Cabinet Office helped Southampton University keep them secret. Why did they do that? Well, the suspicion is that the Mountbattens were incredibly colourful characters with pretty unusual private lives for those days. They had famously an open marriage. And Mrs. Mountbatten, if we can call her that, Countess Mountbatten, famously had a large number of lovers. And of course, the Mountbattens were so close to the royals. So the suspicion here is that the royals are trying to shape the narrative of their own history. And there might be some spicy material in there. I'm glad to say we've got you back now, Andrew. There might be some material in there that is a little bit uncomfortable for them. Is that right?
I think that's right. 30,000 pages have been released. 1,000 pages are still redacted. There are 100 different redactions. Now, some of those we've been able to identify are already in the public domain. They're data protection issues with names of detectives and members of the staff who have already been named. But most of the redactions are Section 37 of the Freedom of Information Act, which relate to communication with the Queen. And so I suspect these are things said by the Queen or said to the Queen. Given the Mountbattens are dead and have long been dead, she for 60 years, him for 40 years, there shouldn't really be any censorship of their material. But I think the royal family have tried to create the story, as we've seen with Meghan Markle this week. We know, for example, that Mountbatten had a particular kink for women in riding kit. And there's certainly some of that stuff's been redacted. I think there may be material on Prince Charles in there, which they're trying to hide. And they're also claiming Section 27, which is relations with a foreign power. And this is, they're claiming, something to do with India and Pakistan in his time in...
Well, I have to say, you know what? The more they cover it up, the more keen we are to know exactly what it is that they were hiding. So very good luck with the rest of your battle. I mean, it is an expensive battle, as we've touched on. Is this the final hurdle now? Do you think you can pull it off?
Well, I hope so. I think we've made the case that even these redactions they're making aren't really justified. And they have deliberately played it long. They have deliberately tried to bleed me dry financially. But I think that justice will be seen, and in this David-Goliath battle, David will succeed.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to reading, and we're all going to be reading them now, the full papers. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Isabel Oakeshott. The show is back every weekday from 12 noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A cold wind blowing out there this Friday. Most places seeing some winter sunshine, but there are also quite a few showers, mostly across the west. Now, we've seen some wet weather across the east from this chain of low pressure systems, an old weather front that's slowly moving out into the North Sea, taking the rain finally away from Norfolk. But we do have the breeze coming in from the northwest, and that is bringing the showers into North Wales, northwest England, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy ones, hail, thunder is possible. A few showers too for Cornwall, but much of central and eastern England, much of eastern Scotland staying dry and fine with sunny spells. Just a few showers creeping down towards Birmingham at times during the afternoon. Temperatures around about or a touch below average and feeling colder because of that fairly brisk wind. Now, the wind will continue to ease through the evening and the showers will also continue to fade, so many places will have a dry night. We will keep some showers going though across North